No residency rules for this panel. I'm Charlie Sykes, and Sunday Insight starts right now. Good morning. Welcome to Sunday Insight. In the week that was, the George Zimmerman trial moves to a dramatic close. Reports that Major League Baseball may be about to suspend Braun and other players as part of its investigation into performance-enhancing drugs. New figures show that violent crime is up in the city of Milwaukee. Meanwhile, residency rules for Milwaukee teachers are lifted, but the city plans a legal challenge to continue to force employees to live in city limits. Summerfest reports bigger attendance at this year's fest. Milwaukee's courthouse shut down for a whole week after a weekend fire. Republicans in Congress pushed to delay the Obamacare individual mandate after the administration delays the mandate on big businesses. Justin Bieber apologizes to former President Bill Clinton for, but you don't really care about Justin Bieber, do you? I mean, neither do I. And local labor leaders cancel this year's Labor Fest. But first, a controversy over armed guards at a mining site in northern Wisconsin. Mining opponents, legislative Democrats, and the media reacted strongly last week to reports that the mining company, Gogeback Taconite, has hired armed security guards for the site in northern Wisconsin. Critics expressed outrage that the guards from an Arizona company named Bulletproof were armed with rifles and wore camouflage. Among the sharpest critics, Democratic Senator Bob Jauch, who said no one in their right mind can justify this excessive use of force. Those who live here and work here hardly want to spend their time explaining that our forests are not filled with mercenaries from third world countries. It was big news when the guards had to stand down when it turned out they didn't have a license to operate in Wisconsin. But this Thursday, graphic and dramatic video of a protester, which a protester put up on her Facebook page. It was taken by anti-mining eco-activists on June 11th and shows an attack on the mining site by masked eco-terrorists. Now, we can't play the sound because the language is just too obscene, but it depicts an assault on a woman who works at the site and the theft of her phone. And the protesters can be heard screaming, "They're going to effing destroy you. Just wait. Get on the other side or die. You think this is scary? You just effing wait. You think there isn't more people coming?" A spokesman for the mining company said, "This video shows that our account of what happened is accurate. If this were your employees or loved ones, wouldn't you want to protect them?" State's top business group, Wisconsin Manufacturing Commerce, said, after watching the graphic video footage of the raid on the GTAC drilling site by eco-terrorists, it's obvious that the hiring of specially trained armed guards to protect GTAC employees operating in very remote location is both prudent and appropriate. Now, joining me on our panel this morning, the Milwaukee Community Journal's Michael Holt, political consultant Mary Jo Boss, political strategist Linda Bruin, and media trackers Brian Sikma. Okay, Brian, you know, on balance, who comes out ahead on this? Was this a PR plus or negative for GTAC?
I think it's a PR plus for the mining company because it does explain why they felt they had to put armed guards in northern Wisconsin to protect their workers. This was an absolute PR debacle for those that are opposed to the mine going in. You have these masked protesters wearing white and black hoods, wearing camouflage capes, running through the forest and assaulting these workers. It's unbelievable to see what happened, and explains why people, I think, are suspicious of those who oppose the mine.
Okay, Linda Bruin.
Well, I absolutely agree with Brian. I think that the problem here is, you know, not only did they tape this thing, but what they taped is so horrific, and then they were stupid enough to put it, I mean, you and I, if we were part of something like that, first of all, we wouldn't, but to put it on air, it was perfect for GTAC. I think the only mistake GTAC made, and it's much smaller in comparison, is the fact that they goofed when they hired a company that didn't have licensure in Wisconsin, and until this video surfaced, it looked like they did hire somebody a little too Rambo-like, a little too over the top, but once you see this video, then you sit there and think, well, maybe they were justified.
Okay, but what about the fact that these guys are in camouflage and they're carrying assault rifles? The point being, it's one thing to hire security, but these were pretty scary guys.
As a woman, I don't care about the PR battle. I'm out there in a remote area, and many of these workers are women. I demand that they have the security. These guys are wearing ski masks for a reason. They assaulted a woman. They threatened in many ways, and said, you know, they're using words like, they're going to kill you, they're going to burn your house down, they're going to hurt you. I think they did what they had to do.
Okay, Michael Holt.
Well, I think it's disingenuous on both sides. I have a problem with these guards wearing camouflage uniforms like they just got back from Iraq. That's an insult to the military. But I also have a problem with these protesters who are wearing KKK hoods. And I guess the biggest problem, though, is I don't know why they need these big assault rifles. They can carry a pistol of some sort and will serve the same purpose. They're really there to intimidate and be visible so they won't do anything.
Right. If the point is to intimidate and to deter those rifles.
Like
well, here's the question. What should GTAC have done? Because this is a very, very remote location. You can't call 911. The cops aren't going to come. These eco-activists have made it clear they were going to block the roads. They were going to loosen the bolts on bridges. What this company decided to do was, look, if local law enforcement is not going to step up, if nobody else is going to come, we are going to deter these folks. And let's be honest about it. They went full out, full metal, scary.
Right. And I have no problem with that. They should have security there. I have a problem with them carrying assault weapons and wearing military uniforms.
Michael, I agree that was a bit too far, but I do agree with Mary Jo that I have no problem that they were armed. None at all. And the bigger question I have is why weren't local law enforcement protecting GTAC? They're legally there. I'm not a big fan of this mine because of the environmental issues.
But I know, but in a special
situation, they should have been
agencies. They have to turn to the mining company. As Mary Jo said, there are workers that need protection. That's up to the mining company to help provide some of that protection.
But you used the word deter, and that's exactly the point. They're not there to win a battle against these guys. They're to say, don't mess with us. And that's why you have the big guns.
Scary guns.
We're not going to fight you. Don't touch
I would like to agree with you, Brian, that GTAC comes out ahead on this in terms of the PR, but I noticed over the last week, I would say that the negative media coverage on those guards was at least 10 or 20 times as big and as intense as the coverage of the actual attack itself. And it's interesting, how people like Bob Jouk later said, well, these protesters are idiots, but he saved his real outrage for the mining company. And unfortunately, I think the media got the wrong end of the stick. So what has your glass half full and what has your glass half empty this week? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Well, Brian, about the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks lost probably their best player, Monte Ellis, who didn't want to live in Milwaukee. But they rebound, and now the glass is half full because now they have Jeff Teague, who actually stated he wants to be here in Milwaukee.
Mary Jo Boss.
Well, my glass is half empty because violent crime in Milwaukee is up. My glass is half full because it's probably due to more accurate reporting of crimes that have been occurring all along rather than an actual increase.
Linda Braun.
Well, my glass became half full when GTAC did decide to hire security, but it became half empty when they had to pull the security because the firm wasn't licensed in Wisconsin. I wish they would have done their homework.
Okay, Brian.
Well, my glass is half full because at least the fate of the northern Wisconsin mine won't be left up to radical eco-protesters. But my glass is half empty because some of the people whose outcome does depend upon the mine, the Wisconsin Geological Survey, well, they've hired some of these protesters. In fact, one individual who's known as the most arrested man in Madison now works for the Wisconsin Geological Survey.
Wonderful, just wonderful. Well, my glass is half full because the Obama administration has delayed the Obamacare mandate on businesses. It's half empty because they intend to stick the mandate on the rest of us anyway. Still ahead on Sunday Insight, as Major League Baseball called out Ryan Braun in its performance-enhancing drug investigation. Major League Baseball about to drop the hammer on the Brewers' Ryan Braun. Now, ESPN reported last week that baseball may suspend Braun for as many as 100 games in connection with its investigation into the involvement of players with the Biogenesis Clinic and its former operator, Tony Bosch. Braun, of course, beat the last rap when an arbitrator overturned a previous suspension after he tested positive for PEDs. But baseball continues to pursue the case. And if they have enough evidence, could Braun and others be suspended for violating the league's drug policy and for lying about it? So let me ask you this, Michael Holt. Is Braun being treated fairly here?
That's a matter of opinion.
Well, that's why I'm asking your opinion. Yeah.
The key is what you said, if they have enough evidence. Right. In Ryan Braun's case, all they have is some notations, and he said that he had actually consulted with these folks.
Okay, now, but they're also saying that he's not cooperating, that the players are not cooperating. What if they suspend him for not cooperating?
I don't think they would actually go that far not cooperating. I mean, you have the right not to self-incriminate yourself.
Well, this is not a criminal. This is not a court of law. You don't have protections against double jeopardy. You're not able to plead the Fifth Amendment with Major League Baseball.
But 100 games is what? $5 million or $10 million?
Yeah, okay, Mary Jo Boss.
If you define cooperating as admitting you're guilty, then why would he cooperate? I mean, he can't win. They're breaking their own rules about disclosure. They're leaking. They're bringing out evidence that makes him look guilty, and they're working with known criminals to manufacture evidence. Yes, to try and manufacture evidence.
Okay.
I think one of the things that bothers me the most about it is they're talking about suspending him for 100 games, both him and Rodriguez. And if they do that, that's under their current rules, you can only do that after a second conviction or finding. And they haven't even found one. So I do think they're treating him and potentially Rodriguez as kind of lambs to the slaughter here, just to set an example of these two guys, when in reality it doesn't follow their past rules.
I think it's very similar to what Lynn said, is the fact that you have Major League Baseball here. It's not a court of law. They don't have rules of evidence that they have to abide by, but they're playing fast and loose with the rules when it comes to the players. But when those players try to hold Major League Baseball by those very same rules, the players are the ones that get penalized.
Okay, but everybody seems to be assuming, though, that Ryan Braun probably was using these performance-enhancing drugs.
I don't know.
I don't know.
It's
not conclusive.
I think that there's circumstantial evidence. I applaud the commissioner. He wants to clean up baseball. He wants this to be part of his legacy. I applaud him for that. But if he's convicted based upon some circumstantial evidence, I can guarantee you Ryan Braun will appeal.
This is the key thing here. Is that Major League, if they're going to drop the hammer on somebody like Ryan Braun at 100 games, they better have a pretty darn solid case. They better have more than a couple of notations on a piece of paper. They better have more than Tony Bosch's testimony. Tony Bosch is one of those guys who would be destroyed in a court of law if it came down to credibility. So they better have this thing nailed down and buttoned up, because you're absolutely right. I mean, you'd be guaranteed that, you know, if they come down and they suspend these players based on this, they all have the right of appeal. They get to play until the appeal plays out. And apparently, you know, since they only have one panel of arbitrators, they have to go one at a time. Or, you know, I mean, think about the backup that they would have here. I think that this leaked story about the 100-game suspension might just be a little bit of gamesmanship. Might be a little bit, because as you point out, you know, you really have to have, you know, 2 offenses here, and he's beaten the first one, and obviously they haven't gotten over that. Okay, now you may not want to hear it. We're going to tell you anyway. Let's dish out some unsolicited advice. Michael Holt, you go first.
Well, mine is to the city of Milwaukee. Pay up your insurance premiums, because as far as I can figure out, there's about 7 or 8 suits aimed at you right now, including the residency suit by the police. You have 5 or 6 suits against the police department. I mean, nobody's getting rich off this except for the lawyers.
Mary Jo Boss.
For those of you who aren't sure if you're going to qualify for Obamacare aid, my advice is to apply early. The Obama administration has admitted that it isn't going to be verifying whether or not applicants for insurance exchange subsidies are actually eligible for the aid.
Linda Braun.
The Milwaukee County Courthouse fire is a classic example of when maintenance is deferred. So my advice is for government officials at all levels, when it comes to maintenance, don't be penny wise and pound foolish.
Brian Sickman.
Well, my advice is for Democrat State Rep Andy Jorgensen. Representative Jorgensen moved into a new district, but property tax records and now voting records show that maybe his whole family doesn't live with him. So my advice, just go ahead and move into that district and start complying with state law in word and in intent.
Okay, very, very sincere, unsolicited advice to you, Earth First eco-terrorists. Do not mess around with this mining company, because they're not playing around. Coming up on Sunday Insight, the message Congresswoman Gwen Moore is singing to Governor Scott Walker. Nobody actually knows whether Governor Scott Walker is at all interested in running for president in 2016. In fact, he has to run for re-election first next year. But last week, a bit of punditry and prognostication from a local politician. Congresswoman Gwen Moore says there's no way Walker wins or even gets the Republican nomination. Now, this is not, of course, the first time that Gwen Moore has opined on Scott Walker.
Hit the road, Scott, and don't you come back no more. Well, hit the road, Scott, and don't you come back no more. What you say now?
Mary Jo Boss.
You know, people have been underestimating Scott Walker for a long time. People didn't think at 25 he could win an assembly seat. They didn't think he could win as a Republican in Democrat Milwaukee County. They didn't think he could win the governorship. They didn't think he could beat the recall. And he did. And as long as the Democrats keep underestimating Scott Walker, he'll keep winning.
Michael.
Me? Okay, look, Gwen Moore is not good. She's not Gladys Knight, okay? But there's some truth in what she's saying. I think it's really too early.
I think that's fair to say. I think this is something upon which you and I can agree that Gwen Moore will never be confused with Gladys Knight.
But the
or
point
the Pips.
Right.
Yes.
But the point is, I think it's too early. I think Scott Walker has ambitions to be president. I don't think it'll be in 2016. I think Paul Ryan or somebody is going to emerge in 2016, and Republicans are going to close their ranks to make sure they get somebody with a chance, a slight chance of winning.
I guess I'm wondering, Brian, why the local dead tree actually.
That was newsworthy.
That was
newsworthy.
newsworthy. I mean, when did Gwen Moore become what the political pundit of?
I don't know. Gwen Moore can't sing. She can't write poetry, and she can't make political predictions, as we found out. And so I don't know why they're going to her as this source of Democrat wisdom. I mean, I don't even know if Mike Tate wants to stand next to her these days.
Let me ask you this, though. This buzz about the president, is it possible that this will become a negative for Scott Walker in 2014? If people think that he's getting too big for his britches, or that he's looking past the gubernatorial election?
If that becomes a perception, yes. And I think the governor is working hard. I mean, you saw with some of the items he passed in the state budget. He's got big reform ideas he's pushing at the state level. And I think there are going to be those that are spinning this for political purposes to undermine the governor's 2014 campaign. In fact, I think that's why Gwen Moore maybe even talked about it, because Democrats do want to try to hold this out there as something. They want to pretend they know the future.
You know, I think it says more about Gwen and what she wants to do with her leadership potential in the future. I think she's signaling that she's willing to be one of the attack politicians in the next presidential campaign, and that will help her rise in the Democratic leadership. Because in the same interview, she talked about how she would like to rise within the Democratic Party.
In other words,
so to me, it says more about Gwen and her hopes than it is about Scott Walker and his.
Gwen Moore could possibly be the voice of the Democratic Party in Wisconsin?
No, I think I'm talking about what her hopes are, not the chances. I have those lower than Scott Walker's.
I am all in favor of that. I am enthusiastic.
Where do we sign up for that campaign?
Exactly. Is what they said this week the same thing as what you heard? Let's go around the table. Michael Holt.
Well, the county board, in all its wisdom, has raised prices on parking at the airport, in some cases $22.50. Patrick Jersey said nobody will pay attention to this anyway. What I really heard is we're going to stick it to you because we need some money.
Mary Jo Boss.
Union leaders this week said they were canceling Labor Fest. What I heard was, in a post-Act 10 world, when you have to actually ask union members if you can take their money, they often say no.
Linda Bruin.
Well, and Frank Kane, a leader in the mining protest movement, said to protesters, "We don't win friends and influence people when we're being aggressive and screaming and hollering and shouting at people." What I heard was a protest leader finally sounding like a grown-up.
Brian Sickman.
Well, on Friday, the Milwaukee County Board sent out a press release saying they were open for business because after a courthouse fire. Now, what I heard when they said that was the delicious irony of the Milwaukee County Board borrowing a slogan from Governor Scott Walker about being open for business.
Well, President Obama is saying that he is pushing something called smart government. What I heard was pay no attention to that Obamacare train wreck. Next on Sunday Inside, our panel picks the winners and losers of the week. First, here's your morning news update. It's time for our panel to pick the winners and losers of the week. Michael Holt, you are first.
Okay, let me lay out this scenario and you can pick the winner and loser. Over 70% of black students who go to college outside the city of Milwaukee never return. They say Milwaukee has nothing to offer them. Unfortunately, our elected officials, civic leaders don't understand what is really happening here. We have a black brain drain here in Milwaukee. And if you have the only people left here after the residency ends are poor black folks, this city's going to die.
Mary Jo Boss.
My winner this week is Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano for getting out before the entire administration comes crashing down to run to her next cushy job as president of the University of California. You get no medal for going down with this ship. My loser is New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who unveiled a $20 billion plan to defend New York City from what he says will be the ravages of global warming in the coming decades. Bloomberg's plan will cost New York City households nearly $3,000 each to fund this politically correct fad.
Linda Bruin.
Well, my picks this week come from science. My winners are the astronomers who found a blue planet 63 light years away. This beauty has 2,000-degree temperatures, 4,500-mile-per-hour winds, and amazing liquid glass rain. My loser is the unethical Italian neurosurgeon who transplanted the head of one monkey to another who died shortly after. Last week, the surgeon announced that transplanting implanting human heads is possible, and he will begin experiments once he secures funding, experiments on humans. This Dr. Frankenstein needs to be stopped.
I want to know what you're reading these days, Lynn. Brian Sikma.
Well, the city of Milwaukee currently employs a full-time coordinator for Mayors Against Illegal Guns, a pro-gun control group led in Wisconsin by Tom Barrett and founded by New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, for allowing far-left special interest groups to purchase his administration and turn it into a front for their gun control agenda. Barrett is my loser of the week. The Center on Wisconsin Strategy is a liberal think tank that champions big government and statist ideas, but gets free office space at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. From being hardcore leftist and getting away with something no conservative would ever get away with, the Center is my winner of the week.
Okay. Oh, yeah, my winners. MPS teachers and employees who finally get the freedom to choose where to live. For the first time in generations, a teacher's skill and professionalism is going to be more important than their zip code. Losers, unlike MPS teachers, other city employees remain under the petty tyranny of Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett and the Common Council, who've decided they're going to ignore the law. Hopefully their liberation won't take too long. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy my radio show on Monday morning, News Radio 620 WTMJ from 8:30 until noon. Have a great week.